What if everything you've been told about belly fat is completely wrong? The information going around right now could be silently sabotaging your progress without you even realizing it. Most people trying to lose belly fat are following advice that was never designed to actually work, and the frustrating part is they blame themselves when it fails. Before you give up on fasting entirely, you need to hear this. What I'm about to share will completely change how you think about burning belly fat. There is a very specific type of fat we need to talk about first. It's not the fat you can grab with your fingers. This fat is far more dangerous than that. It's called visceral fat. It lives deep inside your body, wrapping itself around your liver, your pancreas, and your intestines. You cannot see it from the outside. Visceral fat is not passive. It is actively releasing harmful inflammatory signals directly into your bloodstream every single day. That makes it one of the most dangerous types of fat. Those inflammatory signals raise your risk of heart disease, type 2 diabetes, high blood pressure, and serious metabolic conditions. This is not just about appearance. This is about your long-term health. Here's the part most people never get told. A lot of belly fat actually starts in the liver. When your liver becomes overloaded with fat, something alarming happens inside your body. The liver begins dumping its excess fat outward, into the space surrounding your organs. That fat settles around your belly and keeps building up over time. So the belly you see in the mirror, a significant portion of that is coming directly from a liver that's overwhelmed and overworked. That's the real starting point. If you want to actually get rid of visceral fat, you cannot just cut calories randomly. You have to give your body the right conditions to access and burn that deep stored fat. Done correctly, fasting is one of the most powerful tools available for targeting visceral fat specifically. But the word correctly is doing a lot of heavy lifting in that sentence, because here is where it gets complicated. Recently, a study started making headlines claiming that intermittent fasting actually slows down your ability to lose belly fat. It spread everywhere. The study suggested that fasting creates some kind of internal resistance inside the body, making fat loss harder the longer you fast. That's a frightening claim if you're relying on fasting. That story was picked up by major news outlets. It was framed as a warning, and it caused a huge number of people to immediately abandon their fasting routines out of fear. But here's what nobody was telling you. That exact same claim directly contradicts a large and well-established body of research that shows intermittent fasting genuinely does reduce visceral fat. One particularly well-documented study found that eating just one meal per day, the most disciplined form of intermittent fasting, reduced visceral fat by 4 to 7% measurably. 4 to 7% of fat specifically from around your organs. That's not a small number. That's a meaningful real-world reduction that shows up in body scans and blood work. So now you have two completely opposite conclusions sitting in front of you. One study says fasting slows belly fat loss. Another says fasting measurably reduces it. Both claim to be facts. Here's the truth about conflicting research. When two findings directly oppose each other, they simply cannot both be correct. One of them has a flaw hidden somewhere in the methodology. The question is which one? And to answer that, you have to stop reading the headline and start looking at what the researchers actually did inside the study itself. So let's pull back the curtain on the study that claimed fasting slows belly fat loss. What exactly were the participants doing? What did their fasting protocol actually look like day to day? The study used something called every other day fasting. Participants would fast completely on day 1, then return to their completely normal eating habits on day 2, then fast again on day 3. On the surface, that sounds like a legitimate fasting protocol. Fasting every other day seems disciplined. It seems structured. But look closer and the whole thing starts to unravel quickly. On their eating days, participants had zero dietary restrictions. They went back to eating whatever they normally ate. No changes to food quality, no reduction in carbohydrates, nothing. So on day 1, the body is in a fasted state. Insulin is low, fat burning is beginning to activate. Then on day 2, normal food comes flooding back in. Carbohydrates spike blood sugar, insulin surges in response. And the moment insulin rises significantly, your body switches out of fat burning mode and right back into fat storing mode. Then day 3 comes, fasting again, insulin drops, fat burning starts to activate again. Then day 4, normal eating returns, insulin spikes, fat burning shuts off again. This pattern keeps repeating, on and off, back and forth without any consistency, and the body is not designed to thrive under that kind of constant metabolic whiplash. What that study was actually testing wasn't really clean intermittent fasting. It was testing what happens when you combine periodic fasting with a completely unrestricted carbohydrate-heavy diet. And when you look at it through that lens, the results start to make complete sense. Of course, the body resists fat loss under those conditions. It's responding exactly as it should. Now let's talk about another popular approach that has the exact same fundamental problem. You've probably heard of it. It's called the 5 and 2 method. The idea is simple. Eat normally for 5 days of the week, then restrict yourself to around 500 calories on 2 non-consecutive days. Sounds manageable, sounds like a reasonable compromise, but 500 calories is not really fasting. It's just significant calorie restriction. Your body is still receiving food, digestive processes are still running, insulin is still being triggered, and on the 5 normal eating days, most people go right back to bread, pasta, rice, sugar, processed snacks, the full spectrum of carbohydrate-heavy foods they normally eat. So the body spends 2 days in a semi-restricted state and 5 days flooding itself with glucose and spiking insulin. The metabolic signal being sent is completely inconsistent and confusing. Both of these approaches, every other day fasting and the 5 and 2 method, share the exact same critical flaw. They divorce fasting from any real dietary framework. They treat fasting like it exists in isolation. Like all you have to do is not eat for a period of time and the fat will start disappearing. But the body is far more complex than that. To understand why this matters so deeply, you need to understand what insulin is actually doing inside your body and why it is the single most important factor in fat burning. Every time you eat carbohydrates, bread, sugar, fruit juice, rice, pasta, your blood glucose rises. Your pancreas responds by releasing insulin into the bloodstream to manage that glucose. Insulin's job is to shuttle that glucose into your cells for energy. But when there's more glucose than your cells need, insulin signals the body to convert the excess into stored fat. Here's the critical part that most people miss entirely. While insulin levels are elevated, fat burning is essentially switched off. The body will not pull from fat stores when insulin is high. Think of insulin as a lock on your fat cells. When insulin is high, the lock is engaged. Your stored fat is sealed away and completely inaccessible as a fuel source. When insulin is low, which happens during fasting and during carbohydrate restriction, that lock opens and your body can finally begin pulling from its stored fat reserves for energy. So when you fast for a day and then flood your body with carbohydrates the very next day, you are constantly locking and unlocking that fat burning switch without ever staying in one state long enough. Your body never gets the extended low insulin environment it needs to go deep into those visceral fat stores and actually start burning through them in a meaningful, sustained way. Over time, something even worse begins to happen. When you repeatedly spike and crash insulin like this, your cells begin to stop responding to insulin as efficiently as they once did. This is called insulin resistance, and it's one of the most damaging metabolic conditions you can develop. It makes fat loss progressively harder with every cycle you repeat. Your pancreas has to pump out more and more insulin to do the same job. Insulin levels stay elevated longer after each meal. The fat burning window gets shorter and shorter over time. This is the exact same biological process that drives yo-yo dieting. Every time you go on a crash diet and then return to normal eating, your insulin sensitivity decreases a little more. Each cycle leaves your metabolism slightly more sluggish than before. The weight comes back faster. It becomes harder to lose next time. And you end up blaming your willpower instead of your approach. Your body isn't failing you. It's doing exactly what it was designed to do, protecting itself from what it perceives as unpredictable and inconsistent energy availability. It's pure survival logic. So what is the approach that actually breaks this cycle? What does the research combined with a genuine understanding of human metabolism actually point toward as the real solution? The answer is the consistent, simultaneous combination of intermittent fasting and a ketogenic diet. Not one or the other, not alternating between them, both together at the same time. Let's start with the ketogenic diet so you understand exactly why it's the essential foundation for any of this to work the way it's supposed to work in your body. The ketogenic diet dramatically reduces your carbohydrate intake, typically below 50 grams per day, and replaces those calories primarily with healthy fats and a moderate amount of protein. When carbohydrate intake drops that low, your body runs out of its preferred fast fuel, glucose. Blood sugar drops, insulin levels fall significantly and stay low throughout the day. With glycogen stores depleted and insulin low, your your body has no choice but to find a new primary fuel source. So it turns to fat, both dietary fat and your stored body fat. Your liver begins converting fatty acids into molecules called ketones. These ketones become the new fuel powering your brain, your muscles, your organs. You have entered a state of ketosis. In ketosis, your body is running on fat, not just burning a little fat on the side. Fat becomes the dominant fuel source your entire system relies on around the clock. This metabolic shift takes a few days to fully establish, but once it's in place, your body becomes genuinely efficient at locating, accessing, and burning stored fat, including visceral fat. Now, take that fat-adapted, low-insulin metabolic state and layer intermittent fasting directly on top of it. This is where the real power of this combination becomes undeniable. When you fast while already in ketosis, insulin drops even lower than it does from keto alone. The fat-burning lock on your cells opens even wider. Fat oxidation accelerates significantly. Your body, already trained and adapted to use fat as fuel, doesn't panic during the fasting window. It simply continues doing what it's been doing, burning fat, including your deepest stored reserves. The fasting window extends the period of low insulin. The keto diet ensures you return to that low insulin state when you eat again. The two strategies work in complete harmony with each other. You are never yanking your body out of fat burning mode. You are never spiking insulin and sealing the fat cells shut again. You are maintaining a consistent, clear, uninterrupted metabolic signal. Fast for your window of hours. Eat within your keto framework. Fast again. Eat keto again. The cycle stays clean, the metabolic state stays intact, and fat burning stays active and sustained. This is why the studies showing 4 to 7% visceral fat reduction with one meal a day produce those results. That approach naturally combines extended fasting with very low carbohydrate eating. One meal a day means roughly 23 hours of fasting every single day. Insulin stays low for nearly the entire day. The fat burning window is almost always open. The body pulls deeply from reserves. When you eat one meal and keep it low in carbohydrates, you never fully spike insulin enough to shut down fat burning for long. You return to the fasted fat burning state quickly and seamlessly. Contrast that with every other day fasting, where you spend half your time spiking insulin with unrestricted carbohydrates. The metabolic environment is completely different. The results reflect that difference clearly. This is also why your approach to what you eat matters just as much as when you eat. Fasting duration means nothing if you're destroying the metabolic environment every time you break the fast. You could fast for 18 hours every day and still make very slow progress if your eating window is filled with bread, sugar, processed carbohydrates, and foods that aggressively spike insulin. The eating window is not a reward period. It is not a break from your health strategy. It is an extension of it. What you eat during that window determines everything that follows. When you eat keto during your eating window, healthy fats, non-starchy vegetables, quality protein, minimal carbohydrates, you are reinforcing the same metabolic state that the fasting created. You are sending your body one clear, consistent signal. Fat is the fuel. Keep burning it. Don't switch back to glucose. Don't store anything. Just keep going deeper into those fat reserves. That consistency is everything. It's the thing that the every other day fasting study was completely missing. It's the thing the 5 and 2 method fails to provide. Consistency is the key. And here is something important to understand about visceral fat specifically. It is not the first fat your body burns. When fat loss begins, the body tends to mobilize subcutaneous fat first. Subcutaneous fat is the fat just beneath your skin. The fat you can physically feel. Your body reaches for that first because it's more accessible and easier to mobilize quickly. Visceral fat is deeper, more protected, and the body tends to hold on to it longer. To get to it, you need sustained periods of low insulin and consistent fat burning conditions over time. This is why patience matters when your goal is specifically targeting belly and organ fat. You may be losing fat in other areas first and not realizing the visceral fat loss is also progressing. People often get discouraged because they don't see their belly changing as fast as they expected. But internally, with the right combination, that visceral fat is absolutely being metabolized and reduced. Blood markers improve before the belly visibly shrinks. Inflammation drops. Liver fat decreases. Energy levels improve. These are signs signs the process is working even before the mirror confirms it. Trust the internal changes. Trust the metabolic process. Keep the approach consistent and don't abandon it just because the external result takes a few more weeks to become visually obvious. Now let's come back to that headline one more time. The one claiming fasting slows belly fat loss. Because it's important that you understand how to think critically about studies like this. When a study is published and picked up by mainstream media, the headline almost never tells you what the study actually measured, how it was conducted, or who the participants really were. In the case of the every other day fasting study, the participants were not following any structured dietary protocol. They were not in ketosis. They were not combining fasting with any intentional nutrition strategy. What the study actually showed was that sporadic fasting combined with an unrestricted diet does not produce meaningful visceral fat loss. That is a very different conclusion than the headline suggested. The study was not measuring the effectiveness of intermittent fasting done correctly. It was measuring the effectiveness of random fasting paired with poor dietary habits. Those are completely different things, and yet the headline read as if all intermittent fasting was being indicted, as if fasting itself was the problem. That framing is misleading at best and genuinely harmful at worst. This is why you have to go beyond the headline. Always ask what fasting protocol was used. Always ask what the participants were eating. Always ask whether diet quality was controlled or monitored. When you ask those questions, the picture becomes completely clear. The studies that show fasting failing are almost always studies where fasting was being done without any supporting dietary framework. The studies that show fasting succeeding and producing real, measurable visceral fat reduction are almost always studies where fasting is paired with low carbohydrate or ketogenic eating habits. The pattern is consistent across the research. It's not complicated once you know what to look for. The methodology reveals everything that the headline deliberately leaves out. So here is where everything lands. If you have been fasting and not seeing results, the answer is almost certainly not that fasting doesn't work. The answer is what you're eating when you stop fasting. If you're breaking your fast with high carbohydrate foods, you're undoing the metabolic conditions that fasting created. You're resetting the clock every single time. Progress becomes painfully slow or non-existent. The fix is not more fasting hours. The fix is not longer fasts or more aggressive restriction. The fix is aligning your eating window with the same fat-burning principles that fasting is built on. Bring in the ketogenic framework. Lower the carbohydrates during your eating window. Keep insulin from spiking back to fat storage levels. Let the two strategies work together as they were always meant to. When you do that, something shifts. The body stops fighting the process. It stops adapting to protect its fat stores. It stops creating resistance. It finally gets a clear, unambiguous signal to burn. And slowly but consistently, that visceral fat, the dangerous fat around your organs, the fat your liver has been dumping into your abdominal cavity, begins to reduce. Week by week, it comes down. Your waistline responds. Your inflammation markers improve. Your liver health improves. Your insulin sensitivity begins to recover. Your metabolism becomes more efficient rather than more resistant over time. This is not a temporary fix that stops working after a few weeks. This is a fundamental realignment of how your body processes fuel. It gets better with time, not worse. The more consistently you maintain it, the more fat adapted your body becomes. The faster it shifts into fat burning after a meal, the more efficiently it pulls from stored reserves during the fasting window. You are not fighting your metabolism anymore. You are working with the biological systems that were always designed to keep you lean, healthy, and metabolically flexible. You're just finally doing it correctly. So take this with you. Visceral fat is dangerous, and it requires a specific metabolic environment to be effectively targeted and reduced. Random fasting without dietary structure will not create that environment. Every other day fasting fails because it pairs fasting with insulin spiking eating. The 5 and 2 method fails for the same reason. The metabolic signal is never clean or consistent enough to work. The combination that works is intermittent fasting layered on top of a ketogenic diet. Both applied consistently, both applied at the same time, and both maintained without going back and forth. Keep the fasting window, keep the keto framework, never break the metabolic state by flooding insulin back in. Stay consistent, give your body the clear signal it needs, and let the process do its job. The science supports this completely. The research showing 4 to 7% visceral fat reduction with one meal a day is a direct reflection of exactly what happens when these principles are applied correctly. Your belly fat is not permanent, your metabolism is not broken, the approach just needs to be right. Get the approach right, and everything else will follow exactly the way it was always designed to.